1. I don't talk about this at all in my personal life, but I shared it in the comments. Cockfuck! 1. First, a little context on our friend Irene, what happened when we moved in, and how we found out about her. Then after that, the story of the big night. Context. My boyfriend and I had just signed a new lease, and we were doing a walkthrough with our landlord. He owns 2 houses right next to one another. The house was empty, there was nothing in it. So we're in one of the bedrooms, and we hear a loud bang like something heavy falling. All of us, including my landlord, look at each other, terrified looks on our faces. My landlord looks particularly scared and says he heard it too. We look in every room and we find nothing responsible for the sound. So we finish our tour and are standing outside next to my boyfriend's truck talking. When all of a sudden his truck starts going crazy, every light is flickering, and the alarm is sounding at strange intervals. Not at all the usual alarm pattern. My landlord looked visibly scared and gave us our paperwork and sped off. I cried in his truck, convinced that we just signed a lease to a haunted house. I was freaking the hell out and researching how we could get out of this lease. But a few weeks went by, and as one does, I explained it away and we moved in. The day of our move-in, I opened the door and a tiny black cat comes sprinting out and between our legs. I had 2 friends there to help us move, and all of us saw and heard this cat. It's possible a stray cat got stuck inside, and that's what made the bang, but we searched the whole property and didn't find it. Okay. Weird, but we moved on. Soon after moving in, the activity started. Lights would turn on and off, and smoke alarms would go off, the TV would change the channel, or turn the volume all the way up, doors would open. I talked to my friend, who has experience with ghosts, and she said what I described didn't seem hostile. She said that neutral presences are more likely to do things to get your attention, whereas hostile presences will do things that slowly escalate and insinuate violence, such as things being thrown, furniture being moved, leaving marks on your body, etc. They also said that the initial experiences from the walkthrough sounded, to her, almost like excitement. The house had been vacant for so long, and she thought the presence was just happy. The house was going to be filled with life again. I didn't believe it so much at the time, but looking back now, I can totally see this. Eventually, I get to know our neighbor who lives in the house next door, owned by the same landlord. She starts asking about our time in the house and seems to be holding back. So I flat out ask her what's wrong. My landlord is a lawyer at a firm at the end of this street, and she works there as a receptionist. So she sees the landlord on a daily basis. The day when they were preparing for us to move in, they were walking around the property, checking off things. She went back to her house next door and said she had a strange feeling. She was settling in her bed when all of a sudden, on her blanket, she saw paw prints and movement, as if a cat was making circles and deciding where to sit. Then it sits down and leaves an indent on the bed, and she jumps up immediately and turns the light on. She also said that her dog started barking at the bed. She says she can't shake the feeling that something from the house next door followed her home. That night, she had a dream about an old lady named Irene. In her dream, Irene had a black cat on her lap, and my neighbor and her were sitting for tea on our back porch. When she woke up, she remembered the cat incident from the night before. She was terrified and started saging her house and yelling at Irene to leave. She goes into work and speaks to her landlord, deciding not to say anything, but her landlord brings it up first and says he had a weird dream last night. He said he was having tea with an old lady named Irene who had a black cat on her lap. My neighbor explains what happened the night before, and they conclude that it's too strange of a coincidence. They start digging into the history of the property, because it was vacant for a few years. They found that it was purchased for very cheap because it had been foreclosed. No information about the previous owner, but They assume she must have passed and had no relatives before the bank foreclosed her house. This is speculation, of course. There's no way to prove a lady named Irene ever lived there. But based on their dreams, they were satisfied with this conclusion. Then the saga continues from my end. We never felt a negative or bad energy from it. We were, of course, scared, but it didn't feel life-threatening, if that makes sense. It felt like a motherly presence at times. My electric kettle also often turned on, which left me validated what my neighbors said about them having tea. Obviously, she likes tea. After I found out about the dreams, I spoke to my friend who deals with spirits. They told us that sometimes they just want you to know they're there. She recalled her own experience where she started talking out loud, and the activity died down. So I started casually speaking out loud to her. To me, it was mostly in a joking manner. It helped me feel less scared. A light would flick on, and I'd say, "Hey, Irene." Or something would happen, and I'd say, "You better not be laughing at me, Irene." Just little stuff like that. I didn't believe it would work, but I noticed the activity in the house started to die down. It seemed like she just wanted to be acknowledged. And I thought, okay, cool, if you're going to be chill, we'll be chill too. I remember telling it that if you have no ill intent and you cannot scare us, you can stay, and we can cohabitate peacefully. Life was calm after that, but still small things would happen. I remember walking through one of the hallways and feeling like something was nipping at my ankles. I swatted my foot because I thought an insect was there, but nothing. When you'd walk through that hallway, it felt like a cat was running underneath you, trying to catch your feet or something. The incident. So one night, me and my boyfriend went to bed. Our bedroom is upstairs. In the middle of the night, I was woken by a strange noise, but when I woke, I had complete sleep paralysis. I couldn't talk or move my body in any way. I'd had sleep paralysis as a kid, so I knew what was happening, but I hadn't had it in my adulthood. Then out of the corner of my eye, I see a dark figure come in the bedroom door. I can't turn my head, but I can see in my peripheral a dark, shadowy figure standing in the doorframe. I know that sleep paralysis comes with hallucinations, and I've seen some before, but it had been almost a decade. My heart is beating fast, and I'm sweating, and I remember thinking I'm about to die, and I can't even scream. This lasted for several minutes, and then a light flicked on from the hallway, and then this feeling of warmth washed over my body, like a tingly, warm sensation all over. I remember hearing the words, "You're safe," and just drifting back to sleep, even though every bone in my body is fighting to stay awake. This was very strange because I've had sleep paralysis, as I said, in my youth, and never has it ended like that. Once you realize you can't move, the panic sets in and you start freaking out, and slowly your body begins to wake up, and you can start to move your fingers, toes, face, and then your extremities last. And by the time you can move, you're a blubbering panic attack mess. Never have I just fallen back asleep in the midst of a sleep paralysis episode. I can't even put into words how impossible that feels. Imagine you're in fight or flight, ready to fight for your life and or die, adrenaline pumping through your body, and all of a sudden you just fall asleep. It's like I passed out involuntarily, like I fainted. I woke up again, and this time I could move. So I shake my boyfriend awake, crying and panicked, and I explained that I just had sleep paralysis and saw a figure in the doorframe, and his face goes white as a sheet. This is where it gets even weirder. He tells me about the dream he just had. My boyfriend doesn't usually dream or remember his dreams, so this was unusual. He says we were sleeping in our beds, and a dark, shadowy figure walked in through our back door, left it open, walked through our house, up the stairs, and into our bedroom. He said it was like he was floating above the house and watching this whole thing like an out-of-body experience. The figure stopped at our doorframe, watched us sleep. He could see our house in vivid detail and see his body and mind sleeping soundly. He tried to scream to get us to wake up, but he couldn't, similar to how I was trying to scream but couldn't. The next thing he knows, I'm shaking him awake. So we get up to find that our stairway light is in fact on, and our back door is wide open. We always lock our doors. We're extremely diligent about it, to the point where we check 2 or 3 times. Our door was metal, so even if it wasn't locked, it wouldn't just blow open. So this was very alarming. Of course, we looked all around our house for an intruder, but we found nothing. What was even more confusing is that nothing was taken. We even have a bowl right next to the door with our keys and wallets, and everything was still there untouched. To this day, we're not sure what happened, but somehow it felt like Irene was involved. The light that was on in the hallway was the one that she liked to mess with, and it was like a running joke in our house that when Irene was feeling spunky, she would mess with that light specifically. I don't know if it was a real person or a dark demonic entity that entered our household, but we swear something did. We both saw a dark, shadowy figure with no face or clothes. We didn't see distinct human features, just a human shape with black inside. It felt like it was there for us specifically. My boyfriend described it knowing exactly where to go, and that it came straight up to our bedroom with no hesitation. Irene's light flickered on at the same exact time I had the warm, tingly feeling wash over me, leading me to fall peacefully back asleep. It was a feeling like it's okay, you are protected, go back to sleep. I believe that whether it was a person or an energy, Irene took control of the situation that night. Something unwelcome entered our home, and she saw fit to deal with it. I'm inclined to think it was an energy because she could deal with that on her own. But then how was our door unlocked or opened? I believe she turned on her light and sent me back to sleep so that she could deal with it herself. Maybe she even kept my boyfriend asleep too, as in his dream he described being unable to wake up and unable to wake us up. It was like he was stuck in the dream and I was stuck halfway between asleep and waking in sleep paralysis. Or maybe it was an omen of death that was about to take us in our sleep, and that's why we couldn't wake up and saw the visuals we did. We will never know for sure, but it left us shaken up for a long time. We still have never been able to explain the door. We got a doorbell camera after that, and Irene was quiet for a long time. I expected her to be active the next day, but the house was eerily quiet, and I wondered if she was gone. But eventually, she started showing her signs again. Maybe she used all her energy on the unwelcome guest and needed time to recover. All in all, we've never been able to shake the feeling that we were in danger that night. What the danger was, we still don't know. But there's no doubt in my mind that we were divinely protected. Shortly after this, our neighbor moved out, and we moved into the house next door. When we moved, it was a crazy shift in energy. We went from living in a very chaotic, movement-filled household to a very calm, still environment. Nothing strange ever happened there, but I would still light a candle in honor of Irene every now and then. It's been about 4 years, and I still think about this very often. Let me know if you have any thoughts and opinions to share on what you think may have happened that night. I'd love to hear. Hope you enjoyed the story of what was and still is the scariest night of our lives. 2. So this happened when I was a kid, must have been around 9 or 10. It was at my mum's best friend's house, who also had 3 kids, 2 daughters she adopted and 1 son, which were about me and my brother's age, a year younger. And we would go to theirs and go out all the time. The girl had troubles that she took out on me, so I was not enjoying it as always. But I had to play with them, so I did. We were playing in the front garden, and funnily enough, their house is right next to the graveyard at the edge of the forest. When we saw this thing, it was evening. Still light, but starting to get overcast. We were playing and laughing outside like usual, and it was Halloween. I'm pretty sure, or it was around Halloween, maybe a day or two off. I know for a fact it was October. So we start to go in the graveyard. It was creepy, but that was the fun of it, so we were going in, and then going back to the other side, to her garden. Now, we were right next to the small fence, not the type that obscured anything at all. Then we see this thing. It was a hooded figure wearing a black cape. The hood was up, and of course it was all pointy. Looked like the typical Grim Reaper cape, with long arms so we couldn't see any body parts. It was all covered by the cape. It had something in its hands which I've always remembered to be a smallish knife. We noticed it, and we were super creeped out. We were next to the bushes staring at it, like we all saw it. There was an elderly couple in the graveyard as well, a little further from the figure. I remember them going as we started to see it. It was walking very slowly around, and it stopped for a few seconds, turned its head right to us, so it was looking straight at us, and now us at it. We got really scared, but we stayed there, and then it started running straight in our direction. We screamed and ran a bit away and into the bushes. It never came over the fence or anything, just straight to us, but not arm's length close. At that point we were further along the fence and in the bushes hiding, but also watching. We saw it through the bushes that it was back in the spot it first was, standing again, and we saw the knife very well now in its covered hand. We never saw a face at all, only black even when it looked at us. So we walked slowly in another direction, and then maybe we looked away for a second, and when we looked again it was gone. We were so creeped out and shocked that it was gone so fast. We peered for a little longer in case it was still there, or if it came back out. It didn't. So we went back to the back garden and house and tried to tell our mums who were too busy chatting to pay attention. All those years after, it was a memory I had. To be honest, I didn't think much of it. At all. I just thought some weirdo was there, but I'd end up not thinking too much about it. But then, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was shopping with my mum. As we sat in the bookshop, she picked up a book with my local town's name in the title and myths and ghosts, because she knows I like stuff like that and find it interesting. I flicked through the pages and looked a little till I saw a small area of my town, which is where my mum's friend lives. The exact area that graveyard is. She said that's where her friend lives, and I started reading, and it's insane. Because it described a ghost, or a legend there, that fit exactly with the description that me and those girls saw. The look of it, down to the weapon in hand and the cape, to it walking slow, and seemingly vanishing into thin air. Apparently it's been talked about and supposed to be seen back in the older times. Can't remember exactly, sorry. I was shocked and told my mum all about it, and again I just can't explain how weird it was, because I thought it was just us that had seen it, not that it was a known about thing. I'm a skeptic, but I have interest in stuff like that. But that experience and seeing that book has made me rethink, and I'm really surprised about it. I did buy the book, by the way, but I know the name of the place, of course, so I can see online. 3. Hey guys, my name is Rosalind, and I live in Virginia. I've been raised here my whole life, and I grew up with stories of all sorts of cryptids around here. Last night, however, was different. My husband Charlie and I were out on a drive to his hometown in North Carolina. This place has maybe 2,000 people, if not less, inhabiting, and it's almost an hour from the nearest hospital. Growing up was odd here, he would tell me. He always said that you were never truly alone, but I always thought it was just the ghosts of hundreds of people who have passed, roaming and curiously passing by. I have seen a few shadows here and there, and I can say I've never felt alone. But Also, I've never felt threatened. This time we were driving there around 10 p.m. There's this spot we like to sit at, and sometimes we need some time away to relax and enjoy each other's company. The drive isn't longer than 2 hours, and we like to take the scenic route around when it's empty. He had mentioned this road he knew he used to love to sit at, and at the end of it is a cul-de-sac of trees. When we approached, we were both silent, but now I know we were both experiencing the same feeling of I'm not alone right now. That's when I saw it. Behind the trees, lurking to not be seen, was a tall, gangly creature. I remember feeling petrified, and when I caught its eyes, I glanced away. I told him to leave right then and there, and later explained what I had saw. As we continued to drive to his old neighborhood, we both continued to feel followed. His streets seemed to have a cast of darkness, not typical on these nights. We turned to our usual spot and parked. At this point, I had described to him what I had seen, and we rolled down the windows to listen. Silence. Fleeting crickets. Silence. I looked at him and felt that trickling fear of being watched again. We hightailed it out of there and began our journey home, both of us at that point realizing that we were being hunted down. My husband knows how to take these roads and curves, but I can only imagine what would have happened if he took a curve too tight and we hit a tree. At some point I glanced out of the window into the dark field next to us, and I saw it running on all fours. I could feel its anger. I was not supposed to have seen it. At this point I told my husband, and he maneuvered us to a small little area with civilization, i.e. a hotel, a few fast food places, and a Walmart. He decided oddly to turn into the Walmart and park. Wrong idea. We quickly realized we were being searched for and created a plan to escape. We both knew what was going on, and we both knew we narrowly escaped death at that time. Looking into the eyes of your apex predator is a feeling you'll never forget. We ended up escaping to home, and I tried to lay down to forget it all, but quickly realized that I am not okay. When I closed my eyes, all I could see is its face staring back at me. The long white ashy snout with dark, hollow eyes, and a piercing gray middle to them. It was tall and stood on both legs. It had a hunch, and was terrifyingly skinny. It was hungry. My husband later mentioned he doesn't quite know why, but the reason he turned down the street in the first place was he felt called to go. I felt the same, and I know that had we stepped out of the car, had I not accidentally caught a glimpse into its eyes, we would be dead. So that brings me to now, this morning. I just woke up after being hunted in my dreams of his eyes and face, and I'm asking for help. My husband thinks I'm marked and that I can never return, but I don't know enough to fully understand what's happened to me. Thank you for listening. Please give me knowledge or advice in this situation. May 19th, 2024. 4. This story starts on Christmas, or close to it. My then wife and I went to her family matriarch's house for the family Christmas party. This family is heavily rooted in Christianity. Needed info for debunking. We had our son Tony, age 4, and Danny, age 1. Tony got this interesting teddy bear that had some electronic mechanics. Oh boy, a noisemaker. So while Tony excitedly tore the bear from its plastic prison, I read the instructions. It seems this bear was designed for the child to talk to it, and it would talk back. We put batteries in it, and it sprung to life. It asked for the child's name, and Tony replied. The bear replied, "Hello, Tony, how are you?" Okay, creepy Child's Play vibes. Put this toy on the watch list. It didn't take long for the creep factor to turn up. We were eating dinner when the bear says, "Hello, where are you?" It idly says some more sayings that I don't recall, so Tony's uncle and I tried to find the off button. There is none. Okay, out come the batteries. So the uncle handed me the screwdriver and I turned the thing upside down and started unscrewing the battery cover. The damn thing uttered, "I know how you feel." Unscrewing intensifies. I get the batteries out and it stays silent. Okay, that was weird, but how is it paranormal? You might be asking. Well, when we get home and take out the toys, I pull up the possessed bear and say, "So we really need to let Tony have this?" I ask. In response, without batteries, that damn thing says, "I know how you feel." Nope. In the trash it goes. 5. I've only told a few people about this incident that took place in the late 80s. I'm not looking for an explanation, nor can I offer any proof. I just want to share what my friend and I experienced in the autumn of 1987. I grew up in one of the northernmost states in New England, about 2 hours away from the White Mountains and 45 minutes from our state's meager coastline, in a small working-class city. General Electric and a tannery were two of the largest employers. I think it was early October, leaves starting to change but still on the trees, local fairs underway, and cool enough to rock my HS varsity jacket. I worked full-time and was saving up for my first car, a 76 two-door Chevy Nova festooned with a Pink Floyd tapestry to cover a huge tear in the back seat. My friend Joe and I worked in the same restaurant, and an older cook would buy us hard-earned libations and give us a ride home. Really, he would drop us off at a cemetery that was the midway point between our two houses, and a great place for underage drinking. We were dropped off there with a 4-pack of Bartles & James wine coolers to split between us. It's an old, large cemetery with rolling hills, moss-covered headstones, and large maple trees. I grew up playing hide-and-seek and having BB gun wars there. I even taught an army buddy how to drive stick in that cemetery. It was never a scary or haunted place to me, even after the weirdest experience of my young life took place there. There was a gazebo where we would sit and drink beers and wine coolers. It was open-aired with half walls and benches to sit on while we chatted and drank. All we had between us was that one 4-pack, so we were not drunk or under the influence of anything else. We began hearing footsteps coming in our direction. They sounded like someone walking in leaves. It later occurred to me that was the first thing that was odd, as the leaves were still on the trees and the cemetery was well maintained. "Cops," Joe hissed, and I answered, "Kids." The footsteps came closer. We crouched below the half-wall facing each other. The smiles on our faces growing more and more nervous until they disappeared altogether. The footsteps came at a measured pace. No other sound accompanied them. No jingling of keys, no fabric brushing against each other, and there was no beam of a flashlight flitting about. The footsteps kept coming. I could see my mouthing fear echoed in Joe's face. Before we crouched down, we tried to see who was walking toward us, but we couldn't. But that was to be expected. It was a moonless night with little ambient light available. With our eyes wide and our mouths agape, the footsteps came all the way up to the other side of that half-wall and stopped. Joe visibly sagged, and I began to shake as neither of us had the courage to look up at what had to be surely peering down at us. The footsteps began to recede, and we popped up immediately to see who it was. It was nobody. Literally nobody. We could see where the footsteps were coming from, but there wasn't anybody making them. It was dark, but it wasn't pitch black. We would have seen a person. Ducking behind tombstones, we followed the steps a little ways downhill until they stopped. We took that as our cue to leave. We both sprinted home. The next day at school, we allowed that it was weird, and that was that. We didn't tell anyone and went on with our lives. We weren't drunk or stoned, been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and our carbon monoxide detectors had fresh batteries. I have no explanation for this, and neither do you. The 80s were a magical time, and some days contained a little more magic than others. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 377. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do poke the like button and share the video with friends and family. If you'd like early access to these videos, you can get them all on the Monday, all at once. Support me on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. Do that for as little as $1, or more if you like, a month. You'll also find links in the description to the Hellfreezer Teespring store, with various merchandise like hoodies and mugs and so on. And there's also a link to the Hellfreezer Discord there. If you really enjoyed today's video, why not leave a tip? But you don't have to do that, although it is very much appreciated, and it does help. Okay, no other business today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, if you had to choose to live in a world without booze, now, not obviously medicinal alcohol and things like that, but without booze to drink. But in place of it, you had infinite flavors of ice cream, like even flavors that just they evoke concepts and all sorts of things. Like, so you don't only have mint choc chip, you have good night sleep flavor. You know, like the kind of thing they did on The Good Place with the frozen yogurt. Or you can keep the booze, but ice cream goes away forever and ever, and you will remember. Let me know what you think in a comment below. As someone who doesn't drink, bring on all those many ice cream flavors is what I say. And before we go, let's have the answer of the day from a previous video. And this was in relation to foodstuffs you like but don't have enough of. Today's answer comes from Emerald Angel. Beef tongue sounds gross, but when seasoned and cooked, it tastes absolutely delicious. Chopped up in a fresh tortilla, pico de gallo, and homemade salsa. Yum. I don't eat it as much because it is rather pricey, so I only get it on occasion. Thank you very much for your answer, Emerald Angel. And with that, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.